Alrighty, welcome everyone to the November edition of the Dependency-Track community meeting. Thanks for attending despite owasp-AppSec, owasp Global AppSec DC currently happening. For the organizational part, as always, community meetings are being recorded and uploaded to YouTube. The slides will be published to the community repository on GitHub. You can use the Zoom chat to ask questions. Please do let me know if it doesn't work. I think you can unmute yourself if there's any issues. Otherwise, there will be an open Q&A section towards the end where you can ask questions either about the presentation, the project as a whole, or like direct to the presenters, depending on the content. Before I move to the next slide, apologies for the last community meeting. The slides and the video were not uploaded on time. In fact, I uploaded them earlier today. I was, how would you say in English, flabbergasted. I missed this. But it's up now. You can find it both on YouTube and on the community repository now. Also, as always, we would love to host anyone who's willing to talk about something dependency track adjacent. It could be that you build a cool setup that includes dependency track. It could be that you just want to vent, something doesn't work and you want improvements. You have some kind of dependency track related designs you want to introduce in a feature, want to get community feedback. These meetings are a great way to like distribute your whatever you want to present to a greater audience. So again, we would love to host you here. If you have something to present, just let us know and we're happy to have you here. For the agenda for today, I will quickly talk about the past version 4.13.5 release, then the upcoming bug fix release. I will share a few telemetry insights that are hopefully interesting to you. I will give a quick update about the progress on version 5 of Dependency Track. And then we have, luckily, a guest presentation from Viktor, who joined us today. He's from sbomify and he built a Dependency Track integration in his product. So I'm very much looking forward to the presentation of your project, Viktor.
Thank you.
And towards the end, again, Q&A, as I mentioned. Stepping to the past releases to the version 4.13.5, it was released on the 7th of October. It mostly fixed multiple BOM validation issues related to SPDX license IDs. There was a new license being added to the SPDX license schema. It was missing in the validation logic that dependency track uses. So BOMs were uploaded but failed to validate. This was fixed. There was also a vulnerability, a medium severity vulnerability that was fixed. In the last community meeting, I mentioned this was going to be fixed, but I didn't disclose any details. The vulnerability is public now. It evolved around possible disclosure of private NuGet repository credentials to api.nuget.org. Essentially, what ended up happening is you can configure private repositories in Dependency Track, and those obviously have credentials associated with them. And for the new NuGet repository API, there is an entry point. I think it's called index.json. It's a service index, I think it's called. And it is supposed to reference certain endpoints of the registry, right? And Dependency Track relied on a certain endpoint being available. According to the spec, it should be. For some repositories, including Artifactory and I think even Nexus Repository Manager, this endpoint was not available. So what ended up happening is Dependency Track fell back to the official api.nuget.org endpoint, but still used the credentials meant for the internal repository in those requests. I would refer you to the vulnerability details on the advisory. Also, let me say this was responsibly disclosed to us and it was fixed by Colin 5. Very much appreciated. Both reporting and fixing is the best combination you can wish for, I think. So this was really well done. And of course, multiple other fixes. I'm not going to name them all. Now, just refer to the changelog for more details. For the upcoming release, the upcoming bug fix release, it fixes multiple foreign key constraint issues with delete operations issued via the API, for example, the bulk project delete functionality. It fixes the internal analyzer failing due to stale Lucene search indices, but this only affects you if you're using the fuzzy vulnerability analysis, which most people will not use because it is disabled by default. Also, the last version had a, let's say, inefficient database migration. It was touching a lot of data unnecessarily, which for some people caused the migration taking a very long time. We are aware of this, and there has been a fix for this, where a fix was contributed. It will be released with the next bug fix release. And there's another responsibly disclosed vulnerability. We are very thankful people are looking at Dependency-Track and evaluating it, finding issues. So yeah, there's, again, details for this will be published after the release has happened. For the timeline, we're aiming for a release within the next week. Going to the Telemetry Insights. So for those who are not really in the picture, starting with version 4.13.0, we started adding very, very bare bones telemetry data, which we collect. And one of those things that we can get from this telemetry data is unique system check-ins. So essentially, every 24 hours, Dependency-Track deployments will send a very limited set of data to us, and we can then correlate this data, make how do you say it in English? Deduce how many unique systems are running, right? And this graph shows this really well. It shows when we started implementing it, or when people started deploying 4.13.0, and we can see a steady growth up until like a few days ago. And this is only for stable releases. So this is not including snapshot builds. This is not including any custom versions people might be running. This is only official release versions. We are almost up to 5,000 unique check-ins per day, which is, I think, very, very good, and it keeps climbing. As for the version distribution, again, this is only looking at the stable releases, no snapshots. The main takeaway here is really that people are, for the most part, for more than half, on the 2 latest release versions. And most of them, like the biggest chunk of them, is even on the latest version, which is, again, a very good sign. And just because I know people get paranoid sometimes when telemetry comes up, I would too. I just want to remind you that what and how frequently data is collected is documented. The last sent data, or the last data set that we send out, that the Dependency-Track system sends out, is viewable in the administration panel, where you can also disable it. There are multiple ways to opt out if you want to. And the whole collection logic is, of course, public in the GitHub repository. There's no, like, we're not hiding anything, right? Again, please refer to the documentation if you want to disable it or whatever else. But for those who keep it enabled despite knowing it exists, thank you so much. This data is very, very helpful for us. And the intention is still to make this publicly available. So the end idea is this would be on our website ideally, so I don't have to show it to you in community meetings anymore. Until then, I will try to keep you updated on the current state of things as much as I can. As for the version 5 update, we completed the migration from the vulnerability data sources to the new plugin system, which I talked about in the last community meeting. There's an architecture decision record for this specific thing. Excuse me for not including QR codes this time. It would just be too crowded on the slide. This is a hyperlink. When you can download the slides, you can obviously click on these links. We have more reliable notification publishing using the outbox pattern. What this means is there's a highly reduced chance of something happening and the associated notification not reaching its destination, which can currently sadly happen. There's a key value store with support for optimistic concurrency control for plugins. Without context, it probably doesn't mean a lot, so I would just refer you to this architecture decision record as well. We are currently migrating notification publishers to the plugin system, which includes like webhook publishing, email publishing, and so on and so forth. We are reviewing a contribution to add support for c-scrm advisories, which is a big contribution, but a very much appreciated one. And one nice side fact, I guess, is that portfolio access control, which is in beta or which is a pre-release feature in version 4. In version 4, it had a lot of, or it still has a lot of gaps. In version 5, we closed all those gaps. We made improvements for the performance. And the improved version now is being rolled out in a large deployment with over 200,000 projects, around 3,000 teams. And we hope this will really put some pressure on this feature, that we can get some real life load testing done, I guess. Yeah, that's all for the project updates. I would now hand over to you, Viktor, to talk about sbomify.
Thank you, Nicholas. Much appreciated. Let me pop up my screen share and make sure everybody can see it. Is this visible for everybody?
Yes.
Good stuff. Cool. Let me just get my setup here organized. Cool. So thank you very much for having me present today. I ran into Nicholas at owasp Global, interesting enough, in Barcelona earlier this year, and we got interested in working together on this. So this is kind of an outcome of that conversation. A funny turning point back into owasp Global. Quick outline of what I'll be speaking about today. So this is about sbomify, which is a project for security artifacts management, and SBOMs included. Just a quick outline of today's talk. I'll speak about my journey and my problems that I discovered in my SBOM journey, and my journey around distribution of SBOMs in particular, and which is kind of why this project was born. And then finally, I'm going to wrap up with speaking about sbomify and our dependency-track integration. So bear with me here. So let me just make sure I can actually switch my slides here. Cool. So who am I? My name is Viktor Petersson. Done a few startups. I'm the founder of a company called Screenly, along with sbomify, and I'll talk about Screenly and why this is relevant in a few seconds. I really got into SBOMs at Screenly, and part of that was due to the fact that we were working on becoming compliant with secure by design, or secure by default, that is often called these days. And as we were kind of merging ourselves into this platform, into these compliance frameworks, we kind of had to deep dive into the world of SBOMs. And as part of that, I co-led one of the working groups at CISA for SBOM generation. And that has been part of the learnings that I've taken into building sbomify. So Screenly is a secure digital signage platform, and started as a open source project for digital signage with Raspberry Pi, and now grown into something much bigger. Got customers like NASA and a large number of Fortune 500 companies. So essentially, it displays dashboards and similar things on the walls, and security is a massive concern there, which is why we started doing SBOMs. CRA is the other reason why we started doing SBOMs, because as I'm sure you all know, CRA mandates SBOMs, and that was another reason why we started doing SBOMs. So Screenly's need turned into a product, and that product is called sbomify. So about a year and a half ago, I got into the world of SBOMs, and my expectations of SBOMs was roughly around this. So I have a log file, requirement.txt file, for instance. I point that some tool to that, and out I'll have an SBOM. Or potentially I go to GitHub and download an SBOM. Oh boy, was I naive. Yes, you can do that, but you end up with a very poor quality SBOM. And this is kind of something I think is overlooked a lot in the industry. I'm sure people on this call working with Dependency-Track are well versed in SBOMs, but in the industry at large, I think people still think that SBOMs are kind of a dumb problem and a solved problem. But in reality, when you actually dive into it, and if you speak to somebody who actually done any analysis of SBOMs, it's far from a solved problem. So this is kind of what led me into CISA and the CISA working group that I co-led there. The goal for this working group for creating SBOMs was to basically generate an SBOM using open tools and available tools on the market that gets as close as possible to adhere to NTIA minimum elements, or now the CISA minimum elements. Well, still in draft, but we presume it's going to be much the same based on the draft. If you go back to the initial step here, where I showed you in the previous slide, where you just point a tool towards a log file, and then you say, now give me an SBOM. Best case scenario, you get a decent SBOM. If your log file is from a modern ecosystem, like Rust, or one of the more modern Python package managers, you'll get a decent quality SBOM, but you're still missing a lot of data. So in the working group, we developed this blueprint, and it has 4 phases for the generation or authoring, as Sissel tend to like to call it, phases. So we have a generation phase, we have an augmentation phase, an enrichment phase, and finally a signing phase. The generation phase is what I mentioned before. That's you put some kind of tool, you take some kind of tool like Sift or Trevi or whatever you might use, you point it to a log file, and you spit out an SBOM. Now, the next phase is augmentation. And this is something that's often overlooked. If you want to be compliant with minimum elements, you need to take this SBOM and enrich with data that the tool that you use will not have any chance of deriving. And what I mean by that is things like, who are you as a software company? Who are you as a packager? If you are a supplier, you're supplying somebody else's software. So there are a bunch of the metadata that no tool that I've seen, at least in the open source space, accounts for. The next phase then is you take the output of that and you chuck that against a tool that can enrich data. And by enriching, we mean the list that we built using the tool, it may not have license information for all your dependencies. So most tools will just give you, oh, you're depending on libcurl. Cool, that's great. But again, if you want to adhere to the stricter standard for an SBOM, quality SBOM, you need to also include what license is libcurl under, who's the maker of that, and a bunch of more information that you need to include as well. There are tools like Parley from Sneak that can do this using ecosystem.ms, for instance. And that's the third phase in the generation part. The last phase is the signing. And this is important because anybody's worked with SBOMs know they're just some kind of document format. So how can I trust it? Whilst there are ways to kind of sign an SBOM inside an SBOM, there are better ways to do that, in my opinion, like using attestation from various tools. GitHub Action makes it super easy, for instance, to sign the SBOMs. And this is, I'll come back to what this is very important in a second. So this is kind of the output of our working group that we derived, that this kind of blueprint of these 4 phases for the generational authoring side of it. This is important because this is part of my journey of learning to work with SBOMs. So I come back to why this kind of comes back to the whole bigger picture in a second. The next thing I alluded to is transient versus primary dependencies. This varies vastly across Python, across log files, right? We're talking largely about source SBOMs now. If you're talking about other types of SBOMs, it is less of a problem in some ways. But if you talk about purely about source log files, source SBOMs, sorry, transitive versus primary dependencies is a massive problem. Some package managers will capture all transit dependencies. Many will not. Perhaps the worst case scenario would be things like requirements.txt in Python, where you have no reassurances that it's a complete log file, right? If you include, say, if you have a requirements.txt file and you just put in Django 4.something in there, and you do a pip install against that log file, it will pull in probably 20 different dependencies, but you would have no clue about that because they're not captured. So that's a big part of generating quality SBOM, is making sure that you're capturing all the transient dependencies. The other thing that we learned when we actually started using SBOMs at scale at Screenly was that you're not going to have one SBOM. Even in a relatively small product like Screenly, you're going to have 10, 20 different SBOMs that all can change every time you deploy. That can be multiple times a week. So the manual mechanisms of distributing SBOMs becomes much more problematic if the end goal for you as a software manufacturer and ISV is to deliver SBOMs to either your customers or to kind of some legal entity. In the case of CRA, this is a big problem. So you need some kind of mechanism for distributing SBOM. And again, this is kind of where sbomify was born. The other thing that I have a big beef with is a large number of people in the SBOM community tend to squash everything together in a massive, big, baked SBOM. And that's a massive problem because, oh, I'm going to jump here, because you lose so much context. So if you only have one takeaway from this entire talk here is don't squash your SBOMs because you lose so much context. And I'll give you a real reason why you wouldn't. If you squash all your SBOMs together and you deliver them as one big product SBOM, if you have vulnerability, okay, asterisk, there are ways to work around this, but generally speaking, if you have a vulnerability in that SBOM that Dependency-Track picks up on, how would you know if it's a occurrence in one place or in 10 different places, right? So that's a big takeaway here, making sure that you don't squash your SBOMs. Now, sbomify, again, is a tool that kind of takes all the learnings that both I had from Screenly and that I had at coding the CISA working group. So we built this tool, which is essentially a GitHub Action module that takes these learnings and makes them stupid simple for an end user. So if you go into sbomify and you create a component, you'll get this simple snippet. And all you need to do here is say, here's my log file. And then since we already provided metadata about you and supplier and so forth, we can automate the entire flow for you. Behind the scenes, we're using other tools and we pick the best tool for the job for the generation of the SBOM. And we pick the best job for enriching that, which is actually something we built ourselves, is to enrich that. And then, they augment that, and then we enrich it using tools like Sneaky, partly from Sneak. But it's a pluggable system where we're building up on the learnings and building up so the end user won't have to worry about figuring out what the best tool for the job is. It's an opinionated piece of software that automatically picks the best tool. Now, the last piece in this is the distribution of SBOM, which I alluded to. And if I were to cite a CISA sharing primer, which is that they call for automation for SBOMs. And I feel like the best analogy here is that the way people deal with SBOMs today, and this is from my conversation with various CISOs and various other people in the ecosystem, people are still dealing with SBOMs like we did with source code in the 90s. They're emailing, equivalent of emailing patches of email. Like if you talk to a CISO, a lot of them they receive their SBOMs, and what they do is they stuck them into SharePoint. And then cool. Now what? Like, how do you know you have the latest thing? So this is kind of a diagram that sets this out. This is called the life cycle, which is another artifact from the working group. And the distribution is a key part of this. You need an automated distribution mechanism. Again, this is kind of where sbomify was born, because you need to be able to build this up. And this is kind of like what we have worked towards. So if you are an ISV or you're building software, you ship to sbomify, and then you can share those as SBOMs to all your buyers or stakeholders. And again, you can run sbomify yourself. Code is on GitHub, you can code it and write it yourself, or you can use our hosted service. But the idea is that you build into sbomify, and then you can share that with numerous stakeholders. And if I'm going to go back a few slides here to what that's really important, is because what you're building, again, you're building not one SBOM. In some cases, it might be a single SBOM. In the case of the Dependency-Track, I think you have, correct me if I'm wrong, Nicholas, but I think you have two SBOMs, one for the API, one for the app server, right?
That is correct, yes.
Yeah. So in case of that, you have two. But if you're looking at many commercial products and bigger products, you're not going to have two. You can have 20 or so forth. So we derived the structure of product, and components. And components can be grouped into project, and the project then can be grouped into product. So a product is what you're actually selling to your end customer. This maps into a second project that I'm involved with, which is the Transparency Exchange API, which kind of maps neatly into this workflow as well, so that you can have standard ways of discover these SBOMs. But it's important that you maintain these SBOMs independently so that you have context of when you're doing analysis. And particularly when you're sending things to Dependency-Track, you need that context so you know where that vulnerability lives. So this is like a structure we built in sbomify, this project and component. And if I'm going forward here again, when you distribute that, that becomes important. So you can then share this with your customers either on a project basis or on a component basis, depending on your access control. But essentially, you can build trust centers for your company or for your project or whatever it may be that allows you to share a website where people can navigate to, where they can pull down the latest SBOMs or even request access to it, be invited to if it's a closed source project, perhaps. We also have a project for concept of releases, where you can cut the release for a product that goes into a particular SBOM in a component, so that you might have different tagging of your subcomponents, but when you cut the product release, you can map that against a particular component SBOM, so that you have a real product release SBOM. And this is again important, particularly if you're talking about being compliant to, say, framework like CRA. So, because then you need to be able to archive that for, I believe it's 5 years. You need to be able to prove that SBOM to auditors and to legislative bodies. So it's a very important thing that you need to archive and keep that. Now, sbomify is not just for SBOMs. The name itself is misleading. It's a artifact hub. So it's not just SBOMs, it's also for compliance documents. And those who have nerded out down the deep rabbit holes of CycloneDX in particular, and also SPDX for that sake, you would know that you can actually express all these things using SBOMs. So when you upload a compliance document, say a pen test report or a SOC 2 report or ISO 27001 report as a PDF, as a compliance document in sbomify, and you download the product SBOM, you can also get all these security artifacts as part of that SBOM, all linked up. And the linking part is really important. Again, I go back to what I said before. We never squash, we link. And that's super important. We never lose context. We're using external references in CycloneDX and similar context in SPDX to link this tree structure. So product simply point to all the projects. Projects then points to all the components. So you have this nice tree structure so that when one thing's changed here, you can just point to a newer version and you have a very neat and clever, well-structured tree structure that adheres fully to both the Cyclone and SPDX structure. The SPDX is still a bit on the work, but it's our aspiration is to be fully feature compatible with both SPDX and CycloneDX. I already mentioned Transparency Exchange API. It's a product that I'm very bullish on myself. Those not familiar, it's another CycloneDX project, and it allows you to create a standardized platform for discovery security artifacts. So if you buy, say, a physical box, oops, you have a box like this. The idea is that using just the barcode on this product, you can traverse your way all the way down to find the SBOM. So that's another project that I'm involved with, where sbomify will be part of being compliant with. So those are some big picture items on what we do at sbomify. So mapping this back into Dependency-Track and sbomify. Right now, sbomify is a pluggable platform. And what I mean by that is, like, we want to be a hub where we can plug into the tools that people want to do analysis using. Dependency-Track is great, but there are other tools out there that might focus on other things. So right now we're integrate with Dependency-Track and OSV from Google. We are looking at integrating Guac, for instance, as another option to run. And as these tools emerge, the idea is that you as a user or you as a producer of SBOMs can ship them to sbomify once, and then we federate them out to all the different platforms. So think of it more like Zapier almost for security artifacts. So you don't have to upload to multiple places. So if you ship to sbomify, we in turn can ship this to DT for you. So you don't have to do that integration as well. the way it maps, and thank Niklas for helping me with getting the logic and terminology in my API integration with DT right. A sbomify component, as you saw in the previous slides, maps to a DT project. This is important because that means that even if you're running, as we are for some of our customers, DT in a shared environment, the project is siloed. So we create a project per component, and then every time somebody uploads a new SBOM for that component in sbomify, we ship it off to DT. And then we periodically pull back the results, and then we visualize that in the UI so that you can see the result over time. This is how the UI looks, and I'm going to dive into a quick demo of the platform shortly here. But this, as you can see, is a screenshot of sbomify, how it looks. As you can see here, we are pulling, we're showing a GitHub Action module here, and we found some vulnerabilities. And actually, you mentioned before, Niklas, about the fuzzy matching. I accidentally turned on fuzzy matching here, and that's why you see a massive spike here and a bunch of false vulnerability matches. So these are some references before I go into demo. So sbomify.com, sbomify is like github.com/sbomify/Spotify, and the GitHub action. It's all there on GitHub. My personal website is vpetersson.com for more information there. But now let me dive over to the actual interface and actually give you a live demo, assuming the demo gods are with me. All right, let me see here. So can you see my screen still?
Yes.
Perfect. All right, so we have a dashboard here. You can see we have, in this particular workspace, we have 1 product, 4 components, so 4 projects and 8 components. And you can see here, there's the screenshot I shared with you earlier. You can see exactly where things would happen. You can go in here and say, oh, actually, which provider? Oh, these are all from DT, sorted by severity and timeline and so forth. You can go in the product, and you can see this for the sbomify product, and we have these 3 projects. So we have backend, frontend, marketing site, and tools. And then if I zoom in on these products, I can go in here. So if I look at the Django stack, for instance, I can see exactly what's information about these. And this is the metadata that I mentioned. So you can go in here and fill out all the metadata, all the contacts, and all that the people are involved, so you can have a complete SBOM. You can see particular for this product, what we found here. This is for an older version, but you can see the vulnerability is found. And then I can go in, I'm going to cancel this action, so I don't save that. And then we can go in here and we can see the vulnerabilities, and we can see the actual findings here. So we find the data that DT reported for this problem. So that's that. And releases is the second thing I mentioned. And as I mentioned, you can create these pages that are public. So I can toggle the project and make it public. And if I copy the URL here, and if I go to that URL, you can see I'm taking the public page that I can navigate. Then you can see the releases. I can navigate these projects. So backend, I can go to backend. I can see the components, and I can download that SBOM if I so desire. So I can download this SBOM here. And if I go back to here, I can download the release SBOM as well, which is this product SBOM that ties into the project and the components. It aggregates up using external references in CycloneDX. So that's the product real quick. Again, it's on GitHub under sbomify/sbomify. And yeah, those were the main things I had to speak about. Niklas, we said we're gonna leave some time for Q&A. I ran through my slides a bit quick, perhaps, but maybe we pause there and see if there are any questions.
Amazing. Thank you so much for your presentation, Viktor. It looks very, very nice.
Thank you.
Do we have? Sorry. Yes, please go ahead.
No, go ahead. Go ahead. I had some things, but yeah, go ahead. No, if there are questions, let's start with questions.
Yeah. Does anyone have questions in the audience? Three, 2, 1. Sold. Apparently not. Okay, Viktor. What is your?
Yes. What I would yeah, my experience working with Dependency-Track is very straightforward. I think our integration was fairly quick to build. What I would love to learn more about from your perspective is two things, which ties together this, and this is kind of like a sbomify plus DT question is the first one is version support for CDX 1.7, which is now live. We haven't done a support for that yet. Is that something that what's the roadmap status for that on the DT side of things?
So the limiting factor here is the library that we use for parsing those new versions, and the library has not yet been updated with support for it. Unfortunately, I'm also a maintainer for that library, so it's kind of a unfortunate situation. But yeah, we want to have support very, very soon. Yes.
Gotcha. The other thing is that I'm curious about is the fuzzy matching. That's something that I have not found the perfect optimization for that yet, but I'm curious about your take on that and where things are heading.
Yeah, so to be fully honest, this was a contribution by someone who wanted it. It utilizes a Lucene index, which is kind of a local Elasticsearch, if you will. And that index is very hard to keep in sync with the actual data in the database. And also because the matching is fuzzy by its name, it by design will raise false positives. And the data that we get from vulnerability database is very hard to predict, making it very hard to tweak this particular feature. So my recommendation for most people would be, for the love of God, keep it disabled until you have a real reason to have it enabled.
Yeah.
Actually, in version 5, this particular feature is also being removed, so it will no longer be offered. Yeah.
Will 5 break any API structures?
There may be a few breaking changes, yes, but they are documented, and there are no breaking changes in how projects are structured, for example. So that should continue to work. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, like from sbomify side, I would love to have people kick the tires yourself, either run it yourself. If you check GitHub, give me a star, give us a star. Check out that. If you want to run it, there's a file. Let me switch my screen share to my GitHub repo, and I can show you this. Quickest up and running is just run the dev mode. There's a dev mode file here that you can run, and then dev mode build, dev mode start, and then you can run it locally. It has all the thing you need to test it out. Otherwise, app.sbomify.com if you want to have it hosted version. But yeah, I would love to have some more ears and eyes on the DT integration. I think things work pretty well. I did run into a license issue recently, which I have not dug into enough. I don't know if it was a faulty SBOM or if it was a problem with DT. Sbomify accepted it. Maybe we have a looser requirement for the SBOM, but it's something that DT choked on, but we had stored. So that's something I can give you some more details on later. But that's the only hiccup I've seen so far. Otherwise, the document integration has worked flawlessly.
Amazing. For the license stuff, I mentioned this in the beginning of the meeting here. In the most recent bug fix release, there was something that may be fixing this particular issue. I don't know. Do you validate according to the cyclone-dx schema when someone uploads a cyclone-dx bomb?
We do.
Okay.
We used both 1.5 and 1.6. Actually, even 1.4, I think we validate, I believe.
Okay, then maybe let's have a chat and let me know some more details so I can look into it.
Yeah, I should have a Sentry issue for that we can look into.
Perfect. There are now questions in the chat, I think. Roland is asking, may have missed it when I went AFK for a couple of minutes. So is there an ETA on the version 5 release? So we were planning to get it done like by end of Q4 this year. There have been some, let's say, circumstances around my job situation. So the timeline will be a little bit stretched by maybe like a month or two. But let's say early Q1 next year would be the goal of a release of version 5. Arjaf, I'm sorry if I'm buttering your name. Terribly sorry. Love the release names in sbomify.
Thank you, Arjaf. Yes, it will be expanded. The name is misleading, but that's where we started. Now it's more like a trust center for security artifacts. But yeah, I would love to have people kick the tires. There are some UI UX bugs that I'm aware of, but we are just getting started, and we're trying to improve that as we move forward. I'm just bringing on some people to work on it right now to accelerate the process forward. But I think, based on my conversation with Steve, I don't think anybody else is doing this on the market right now. So it's a pretty unique product. Cool.
Amazing. Then thanks everyone for joining. Thanks so much, Viktor, for your presentation. It was very, very nice to witness. Yeah, I guess I will upload the recording this time for sure, either today or tomorrow. And we'll see you next month.
Perfect.
Thanks everyone.
Have a good one. Cheers.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.